All right, if you all have a Bible, I hope you all have a Bible. Let's turn to the book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. And I'm going to do a lot of reading today. And there's some parts where I want to stop and we want to talk about it. But we'll bring it all together at the end and how this represents Christ. So, Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Right, that very first sentence there, in the days when the judges ruled. Let me paint the picture for us here. If you go to the page just before that, the page where it says Judges 21 and it says verse 25, in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as he saw fit. I don't think I have to expand too much on that. We can look into the world today. When people do whatever they feel that they want to do, it turns into absolute chaos, right? So this is sometimes described as some of the darkest days of the Israelites. So I'm going to read that again. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So you've got this chaos already ensuing, and now we have a famine. Right, this is a struggle. And a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Some of your versions might say sojourn, right? Which means they intended to go, but come back. Right? But here's the issue. The 7 books before this, from Genesis up to Judges, we see the story of how God promised this land to these people. And so he's brought them into this land only for Elimelech and his family to leave. Kind of the opposite of what God wanted, right? So you got to go up past Jericho, cross the Jordan, just north of the Dead Sea, make a right, head down to Moab, and get out of town, right? Back into the wilderness. Away from God. Doesn't seem right. But there's a famine. He's struggling. And what I find funny is he comes from Bethlehem. The Hebrew word Beit Lechem. Beit meaning house, Lechem meaning bread. The house of bread. Jesus claims to be the bread of life. Where was he born? The house of bread. Kind of cool, right? But so they leave Bethlehem and they head into Moab. Verse 2, the man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. And after they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Now, I know you all came thinking this is going to be a wonderful Christmas sermon, but here's tragedy and suffering to begin with. And we'll see how this changes. We'll see how God uses this, because it's really cool. But her 2 sons, their 2 sons, married Moabite women. They're not Israelite women. They're stepping outside of the Israelite tribe. And God was known for saying, we're not doing that. That's not what we should be doing, right? So not only have they left, they've now married Moabite women. Elimelech has died, and their 2 sons have died. And now you have Naomi left with no sons and 2 daughter-in-laws. Verse 6, when she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you, as you have shown to your dead and to me. And may the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. I love that she has that word rest. In fact, there's a Hebrew word there, menukal, which is rest and security. And she simulates that to marriage, right? To find that rest. But what I'm amazed by Naomi. She's lost her husband and her 2 sons, and she's in a land she doesn't really know. I would be miserable if I lost my wife and my future child, and I'm in a place where I don't really know, right? And we've all been through suffering like this before. We've all suffered that we question, what are you doing, God? Like, where are we going with this? And so often, sometimes people decide to turn away from God. There's this point where I believe suffering, it makes you an honest Christian. You either walk away from God or you lean into Him. And here we see Naomi, who's been through a horrible, horrible time. And her response, hey, let's go back to where God is. Let's lean in to where God is. I love this attitude because so often the mindset that we have is, why me? Why, God? Why would you do this to me? I've been a good person. I obey you. I come to church. I do all this stuff. And why me? And it's so easy for us to turn away from God. And Naomi leans into Him. That action. Let's go. And you see the love she has for her daughters-in-law as we read on. Verse 8, then Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you, as you have shown to the dead and to me. And may the Lord grant each of you, may the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. And said to her, we will go back with you to your people. But Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons? Who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Kind of feel like there's some sarcasm there. Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. So you see this love that Naomi has for her daughter-in-laws. Now, go be with your people. Go find a place. Go find a happy life again, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. And at this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you from me, you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Ruth's name means friend, companion. And at this moment, a young woman who could easily have left her mother-in-law, who's been urged by her mother-in-law to go, she could have gone. But there's a loyalty that we see in Ruth here that's unlike many other stories I read, where she's willing to give up her people and her God to go with Naomi, a woman who has just gone through terrible suffering. But hang on, if your God is so awesome and so powerful, why did you just lose your husband? Why did you just lose your 2 sons? What kind of God is that? Instead, Ruth sees it from a different perspective. Wow, this is what's happened to you, and you're still going back to God? You see, I think in times of our struggle, in times of our suffering, when we stand up and lean into God, when we turn back to God, people see that. And we're proclaiming how amazing God is. Because through our struggles, we still go back to God. And so Ruth sees this. There's a testimony from Naomi by her actions. And Ruth sees this and realizes how powerful this is, to the point where she says, your people will be my people and your God will be my God. And may God punish me, basically, if anything other than death separates us. Wow. That's the testimony of Naomi and the response by Ruth. Verse 19, so the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi, because Naomi means pleasantness. Don't call me pleasant, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Have we ever spoken like this before? What I love about Naomi is that she's not bitter towards God, right? She knows that her life has been made better, and she doesn't understand why. Or maybe she thinks it's because they left. Or maybe she thinks it's because her son's married a Moabite woman. Or maybe she messed up. And we all go down this path of, oh, what have I done? Maybe it's me. Maybe it's something I did. Maybe it's something I didn't do. I'm being punished. Oh my goodness. This is my fault. But we're going to see how this story plays out, because right now, Naomi has no idea what's coming. So Naomi returned to, verse 22. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. In chapter 2, verse 1, now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. And Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she found herself working in the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Right. Do we think this was a happy coincidence? Or do we start to see the hand of God working here? Because I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. You read the book of Ruth, and you don't really see the writers saying, well, God did this and God did that. God is pretty much anonymous here. And yet, when we step back, we see God working. And so you've got Boaz, a relative on her husband's side. She doesn't know Boaz. She's been in Moab, and she's arrived, and now she's gone to glean in the fields. Now, gleaning in the fields meant that she would go and pick up behind those who were working. This is kind of like a social program. It's very clever. God in Leviticus says that, when you glean the fields, you kind of leave the corners out so the people who are struggling can come and get some food. And it's not just a handout. They've got to come and work for their food, but at least there's something for them. It's a pretty cool social program, I think. So she's gone to glean in the fields. And it turns out she's in Boaz's field. Coincidence, right? Or God's way of remaining anonymous. In verse 4, just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. I love this. Boaz. Morning, everyone. The Lord be with you. And how do his workers reply to him? The Lord bless you, they called back. I dare you, next time you're at work, walk in and say, good morning, everyone, the Lord bless you. May the Lord be with you. Yeah? How many of us are brave enough to do that? And maybe your coworkers will be like, man, Lord bless you. I love this man because that's how he starts his day. That's how he greets people. Right, so the Lord be with... verse 5, Boaz asked the foreman of his harvesters, whose young woman is that? He's noticing her. The foreman replied, she is the Moabitess who came back from Moab with Naomi. And she said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. And she went into the field and has worked steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. This tells me something about Ruth, her willingness to work. She's had a rough time, but hey, we need to get up and we need to keep going. The suffering is terrible, but we've got to get up and we've got to keep going. And she's gone and she's worked hard. But more so, in Leviticus, this law that people could come and glean from the fields was a law. But with Ruth, she's still gone and asked if she can glean in the fields. Now, she could have just gone and done it. But the fact that her personality or her character takes her to the workman and says, hey, do you mind if I could glean in your fields, tells me something about Ruth, right? So, verse 8. So Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the girls. I have told these men not to touch you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. At this she bowed with her face, as she bowed down with her face to the ground, and she exclaimed, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? Boaz is providing protection here, some rest and refreshment. Verse 11, Boaz replied, I have been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. And may the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord, she said. You have given me comfort and have spoken kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servant girls. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here, have some bread, and dip it in the wine vinegar. Okay, so up to this point, we see this interaction of Boaz getting to know her. He notices Ruth's work ethic, her pleasantness, her character, and he's found out more details about her, and slowly we see this growing. And maybe, just maybe, this is a point of a little bit of romance. Come in and eat with us. Gentlemen, if you want to show romance to a young woman, take her on a dinner. Take her out to dinner, right? Buy her the food she wants. And when she says she doesn't want chips, but you know she's going to eat your chips, buy your chips and let her eat your chips. Show a little bit of romance. Verse 14, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar. And when she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. And as she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men. Even if she gathers among the sheaves, don't embarrass her. Rather pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. See what Boaz is doing here? Not to dishonor Ruth, but to allow her some dignity. Let her work for it, but help her out. I love that. Verse 17, so Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah, which is about 22 liters from my understanding. That's 11 2-liter Coke bottles, everybody. So she carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." And then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added, "That man is our close relative. He is one of our Kinsman Redeemers." Then Ruth and the Moabitess said, "He even said to me, 'Stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with his girls, because in someone else's field you might be harmed." So Ruth stayed close to the servant girls of Boaz to glean until the barley and the wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Now the word Goel represents a special family representative, a chieftain in some ways. This is a Kinsman Redeemer. A Kinsman Redeemer had a few responsibilities according to Levitical law. One of which, the Kinsman Redeemer was generally a family member. He had the duty of buying family members out of slavery. And we find that in Leviticus 25. He had the duty of buying back the land that had been forfeited. So he's got this duty to go around and to make things right for the people, for his family. One of his responsibilities, if someone died, was to marry that person and to continue that name, right? So it seems a bit weird to us that you go and marry your sister-in-law to keep the name going, or a family member to keep the name going. But this is what was done, and we're going to see how this shows us what Christ has done for us. We're almost there. So, chapter 3, verse 1. One day Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you, where you will be well provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash and perfume yourself, and put on your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." So Naomi and Ruth are coming up with this plan, right? Our mother-in-laws are scheming, right? No? Okay. So we see Naomi is coming up with this plan, and she tells Ruth, this is what you need to go do. And Ruth's response is, yes, she obeys her mother-in-law, right? She says, "I'll do whatever you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. And when Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Now, I would argue that this isn't alcohol. I wouldn't go down that road. I wouldn't say, because he's in good spirits that he was drinking. No. The reason I say that is because when they were harvesting the barley at this point in time, it was often known that people would come in and steal. So you've got Boaz sleeping the night on the threshing floor as security. And we do see this in Scripture where the Philistines came into the threshing floor and stole stuff. So you've got Boaz on high alert. He's now finished his work, and he's protecting the place. And he's laid down. And Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, and he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. I'm going to stop here because I've read a lot of different opinions on this, and a lot of people will say, well, this could have been a sexual thing. It's not. And you can say that, and I can show you in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 8, God covers us with his cloak. And he goes on to make this covenant with us. This covering is like a covenant. And so she's taken the corner of his feet and basically said, make this covenant with me. And he realizes what she's done. In verse 9 it says, I am your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than which you have showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am near of kin, there is a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. He also said, bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out. When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then he went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, how did it go, my daughter? Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. We see here Boaz's loyalty to do the right thing, to say, hey, there is someone closer than I. Let's go and make this right. Let's do the right thing. We see integrity. We see a man of noble character. And not only that, the word that he uses to describe Ruth is hayil, strength, moral strength, good quality, integrity, valiant, valor, virtue. It's almost like he describes her as a hero. These words are used throughout the Bible. Valiant, valor. So we see 2 people with amazing character. So now we wait. Now we see what Boaz is going to do. Chapter 4. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there. Now, the town gate was like the courthouse. You go up there because no one had mobile phones, so you went there to catch the guy as he's coming back in, and you'd have a bunch of witnesses around there. And so when the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here, and they did so. Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggested you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so that I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. Now this is good news. Someone comes to me and says, hey, Keegan, there's a business opportunity to buy some land. I'm like, sounds like a good deal, right? You see what Boaz is doing here? He's doing the right thing, but there's a bit of wisdom in how he's doing it. And so the man says, I will redeem it, he said. Now, I wonder if Naomi and Ruth were listening in here. I wonder if their hearts sunk, like, oh, no, please. Maybe Ruth really wanted Boaz. Then Boaz, very quick on his feet, he said, on the day that you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the Kinsman Redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. What? There's a catch? There's a catch to buying this land? No, whoa. You do it. You redeem it for yourself. I cannot do it. Verse 7, now in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and the transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was mentioned, this was a method of legalizing transactions in Israel. Yep, you read that right. They took off his sandal and they would give it to the other guy. So the next time, when the time comes and I've got to hand over the mantle of the youth minister to someone else, I'm going to take off my shoe, I'm going to give it to the other guy, right? But if you read in Deuteronomy, if the Kinsman Redeemer doesn't redeem, not only is he taking his sandal off, but the lady who this is about was to spit in his face. It's kind of fun, right? But there seems to be more of an honorable way of what they were doing. So all they do is he takes his shoe off and he gives it to Boaz. So the Kinsman Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself. And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilon and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with this property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today you are witnesses. Then the elders and all those at the gate said, we are witnesses. And they blessed them. Listen here. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you have standing in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem, though through the offspring of the Lord gives you by this young woman. May your family be that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. "2,000 years ago, a young baby was born. And we're going to celebrate that tomorrow. But it's not just about a baby being born. It's about a Kinsman Redeemer coming into the world. The story that we see points towards Christ. The idea that the Kinsman Redeemer was a family member. We see in Hebrews 2:11, Jesus is not ashamed to call us brothers and sisters. And Jesus added humanity to his eternal deity so that he could become our kinsman, and save us. The Kinsman Redeemer had the duty of buying family members out of slavery. Jesus redeemed us from slavery. The Kinsman Redeemer had the duty of buying back the land that's forfeited. Will Jesus not come back and redeem the earth that we sold over to Satan? The Kinsman Redeemer took her bride. We are known as Jesus' bride. He's our Kinsman Redeemer. We see Boaz was not motivated by self-interest, but motivated by love for Ruth. I would argue that Jesus' motivation for redeeming us is his great love for us. Boaz, a Kinsman Redeemer to Ruth, had to have a plan to redeem Ruth unto himself. And some might have thought the plan was foolish, because sometimes we look at the cross and what happened there and we think, what in the world? But Jesus had a plan to redeem us. And his plan worked, and it's glorious. Boaz redeemed Ruth. He provided a glorious destiny for Ruth. Jesus, our Kinsman Redeemer, provides a glorious destination for us. So in conclusion, 3 points that came out of this story. Naomi, her heart, the heart that we have, the emotional side of suffering and tragedy. When faced with this terrible suffering, Naomi didn't run from God. She leaned in to God. My lesson that I took from Naomi is that we need to lean into God when times are tough. We need to be that example that preaches to the world that even when we're struggling, God is our number one. Ruth, the head, to logically think things through, was faced with a decision to stay on the path of suffering or to go back to her people, which seems easier. But she's persuaded by the loyalty of her mother-in-law to God. Your God will be my God. And not only that, she gets to work. She shows kindness, respectfulness. She's humble in nature, and she leans into God. Boaz, I like to think of the hand as a practical matter. Boaz lives his life with honor and integrity. I love this man, so much so that I said to Vic we should call our son Boaz, but she's not too happy about that one. But I like it. He does what is right. He's caring, he's kind, he's respectful, he's loving, he shows wisdom. Blessed be God. He greets people by saying, "The Lord greet you," or "The Lord bless you." He leans into God. The curious thing here is that God is not really mentioned in this book. But these people show us that God is working and weaving together this amazing design that He has for us. And going back to Naomi, she's in that position where she doesn't know what's coming. She is dealing with suffering right here, and she doesn't know what God's about to do. And I guess the heavenly hosts are all looking down going, wow, look at what God's doing. What we think is weakness, God says, let me show you. So in this mundane life, and we all live mundane lives, God is working. He's doing something. I don't know what He's going to do. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 days' time. We're going through a bit of suffering right now, Vic and I. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 days' time. Maybe I turn around and go, yeah, that was pretty cool. Maybe I do that in a year's time. Or maybe that doesn't happen in my lifetime. Maybe I'm standing in heaven one day going, oh, wow, that was cool. It's amazing what God has done. So, how do we lean into God? Here's the lesson within the lesson. Read our Bibles. I know we've read 4 chapters today. It took us about 35 minutes. Read our Bibles, ladies and gentlemen. When we need perspective on what we're going through, God gives us that perspective. My Christmas wish is that we read our Bibles more. 3 to 4 chapters a day, you'll get through the whole Bible in a year. 30 minutes. 30 minutes a day, you'll get through the whole Bible in a year. I promise you, this will change your life. My final story, when I was a minister in Australia for a small congregation, I had no idea what I was doing. I did not go to school to study theology. I had no clue why God had put me in this position. It was a wild roller coaster ride. But here I am with this congregation looking at me. So what we did, we just started reading Bible. That's all we did. For 1 year, we read 22 books, word for word, like we just did today. And I saw people's lives change. There was a man who was so ultra difficult. I love him. Speaks like this. But he had some strong opinions. And one day he came to me and he said, Keegan, I must tell you, you've changed the way I've been thinking about things. And I laughed and I said, mate, you realize it's not me. I haven't done anything, but all we did is just read. God changes our lives. He'll help you through suffering. He'll redeem you. And that's all I want. I just want to be with God. Amen. If you need Christ, today is a good day to do that. If you need Him, there are people here. We can study with you. We can help you. Come forward. If you're going through a tough time and need the prayers of the congregation, come forward. Bless you all, and let's have a good week. Let's stand as we sing. Thanks.